During a fierce thunderstorm, I assisted my neighbor in repairing his vehicle. 2 weeks later, he reported me to the city for running an unauthorized repair shop, resulting in a $900 fine. When I confronted him, he smirked and said, "You asked for it, pal." I bided my time, and the perfect opportunity came. I'm a 47-year-old father who spent most of my adult years in Garland, Texas. My wife and I have 2 adult children. I'm employed as a logistics overseer at a warehouse near Shiloh Road. It's not a flashy job, but it's reliable. I'm not the type to greet every neighbor, but if someone needs help hauling furniture, I'm there. If their car won't start, I'll grab my jumper cables. That's just how I was brought up. Our street is aged, lined with modest brick homes and weary pecan trees. You'll hear children laughing one moment and a lawnmower roaring the next. Most folks here are like me, working hard to stay afloat, not seeking conflict. Darren moved in about 3 years back. At first, he kept to himself. No spouse, no partner, just him and a massive black Chevy pickup. He was distant. I tried a few times to say hi when he settled in, but he'd just nod and turn away. I thought, fine, not everyone's sociable. We didn't have a proper talk until that storm. I recall it vividly because my wife was visiting her sister in Rowlett, and I was warming up leftover stew when the sky turned pitch dark. I've weathered many storms, but this one was intense. Howling winds, rain so heavy it stripped the mulch from my garden beds. Then I heard shouting outside. I cracked open the door, and there was Darren, cursing and slamming his truck's hood. His voice pierced the thunder, loud enough to carry into nearby homes. I stepped out and called, "You okay?" He shouted back, "Truck's kaput. I'm supposed to be at the damn airport. My kid's waiting." He looked frantic, drenched, eyes wild. I grabbed my old work coat, dashed over, and peered under his hood. I'm no professional mechanic, but I've tinkered with enough starters and alternators. I told him to shift it to neutral, and we pushed the truck up my driveway, slipping in the muck. Lightning flashed all around. We barely spoke, just the essentials to get the job done. I spotted a loose wire and some rust on his battery. I had tools in my garage and a spare connector from my old Chevy. We worked swiftly, hands trembling from the chill. He kept checking his phone, anxious his son would feel abandoned. After about an hour, the truck roared to life. Darren let out a cheer and clapped my back so hard I nearly stumbled. "I owe you one, Mike," he said, grinning for the first time since I'd known him. I was soaked and shivering, but helping felt right. That night, I watched his taillights fade, thinking maybe he wasn't so bad. 2 weeks later, I came home late from work. A glaring orange notice was slapped on my front door. A code violation. The city claimed I was operating an unlicensed repair business. They had photos of me fixing Darren's truck, time-stamped. I felt nauseous. The fine was $900 with a warning that another complaint would mean court. I called the city office, certain it was a mix-up. The clerk wouldn't reveal the complainant, only that they had proof of ongoing violations. I knew I'd only worked on Darren's truck. The more I thought, the angrier I got. I barely slept, replaying it all. The next morning, I saw Darren in his yard, tending his geraniums. I marched over. I didn't mean to shout, but my voice quivered. "Seen anyone snapping photos of my place lately?" Darren didn't flinch. He just smirked lazily. "You brought it on yourself, pal. Don't play mechanic if you don't want trouble." It hit like a blow. My hands shook. "Are you serious? I fixed your truck so you could pick up your kid." He shrugged. "Too much racket. I like my quiet. City doesn't want garages turned into shops. Nothing personal." I stood in his yard, sweating and furious. I wanted to swing at him. Instead, I stormed home, slammed the door, and punched a hole in the kitchen wall. My wife found me at the table, knuckles bleeding, trembling. I paid the fine to avoid more hassle, but Darren's smug grin haunted me. Every time I saw him wave, start his mower at dawn, or act neighborly, I seethed. He wasn't just a lousy neighbor. He was a viper. I vowed not to let it slide. I started observing him, his routines, his visitors, his secrets. I was waiting for my moment, determined to make Darren taste the sting of betrayal. After his betrayal, something in me shifted. I tried to move on, but seeing him daily fueled my rage. He acted like nothing happened, nodding casually, maintaining his lawn, chatting with the mail carrier. I noticed he got chummy with neighbors post-fine. I wondered how many knew what he'd done, how many thought I was running a shady garage. A week after paying the fine, the HOA contacted me about rules on vehicle repairs and driveways. A letter was taped to my door, and an email hit my inbox. I knew Darren was behind it. He was on the HOA board, a fact he'd never mentioned. My wife grew anxious. "Drop it, Mike," she urged. "Don't escalate." I tried to heed her, but Darren's house triggered me. Things worsened. Someone reported my fence for a broken panel. Code enforcement left a notice on my gate. The next week, my trash bin was left in the road, earning another warning. I knew it was Darren. He was always outside watching. One night, I saw him through his window at his kitchen table with a pile of papers. I noticed something odd. 2 phones on the table. One looked like a business phone. I recalled him boasting about side hustles, never specific. It dawned on me, he was likely running something from his home, untouched because he played the system. I started documenting. I noted when Darren's truck was gone, when deliveries arrived, who visited. A gray SUV stopped by every Thursday night, briefly. I began taking photos from my living room, using my phone. At first I felt unhinged, but I was done being the nice guy. Meanwhile, Darren's son started visiting weekends. He was a tall kid, early 20s, scruffy, with his father's eyes. He'd loiter in the driveway, smoking, staring at my house. One Saturday, he spat in my yard while I watered. I glared, but he laughed and went inside. The next day, I found garbage tossed over my fence. Beer cans, a burger wrapper, cigarette butts. My dog nearly choked on a bone someone threw over. I wanted to confront them, but my wife said, "We can't prove it." Still, I knew. It felt like they were taunting me, daring me to crack, so I'd seem like the issue. By then, I was spending nights scouring city records, searching for dirt on Darren. I found he owned another property, a rental on Saturn Road. It had a few code violations, but nothing stuck. He was slick at covering his tracks. The more I uncovered, the more consumed I became. I barely slept, snapped at my wife, skipped friend hangouts, and missed family dinners. Every night I watched Darren's house waiting for a misstep. One stormy Friday, I saw the gray SUV again. This time, Darren opened his back gate, letting the SUV into his yard. I crept through my yard to spy. The driver handed Darren a fat envelope. Darren counted cash, then gave over a locked crate. They shook hands, swift like old pros. I snapped a dozen photos. I knew I had leverage. I planned to strike Darren where it hurt, his wallet, his reputation, his cozy life. But he outmaneuvered me. I got another fine, this time for unlawful surveillance, after he reported my photos. I was warned to stop harassing him or face a restraining order. The city now saw me as the troublemaker. My wife was terrified. "We can't beat someone like him," she said. I almost agreed, but I'd lost sleep, cash, and calm. I wasn't letting Darren triumph, so I began plotting something he'd never anticipate. After that last fine, I felt cornered. Darren was always ahead. I stopped snapping photos but kept watching. I knew pushing further risked more than money, but I couldn't let him keep winning. I sought help, someone who'd understand Darren's tactics. I thought of Rick, a former co-worker now across Garland. Rick despised the HOA more than anyone. He'd battled them over his patio cover. I called and spilled everything. Darren, the fines, the threats, the SUV, all of it. Rick chuckled. "He's running a hustle from his house, Mike. That's their playbook. Skirt the rules just enough." He urged me to dig deeper, but not solo. He connected me with Phil, a retired code inspector who still consulted. I met Phil at a coffee shop. He listened, nodded, then asked, "Anyone else clashing with Darren?" I said no one spoke up. Phil grinned. "You're not alone. Guys like him always make enemies." Phil made some calls. Meanwhile, I laid low. No more spying, no more fights with my wife. I acted normal. I mowed my lawn, fixed my fence, waved at neighbors. Darren eased up too, no longer glaring daily. Then one morning, a neighbor, Mrs. Lopez, knocked, crying. Her dog got sick after eating something tossed into her yard, same as mine. She saw Darren's son near her fence late at night. I realized I wasn't his only target. I spoke to 2 other neighbors. Both had recent code complaints, one for a chipped driveway, one for messy shrubs. I saw Darren's pattern. He was targeting us systematically. With Phil's guidance, I gathered solid evidence. Records, dates, neighbor accounts, not just photos. Phil taught me how to file public records requests. He showed me how to spot fake complaints. We discovered Darren was sending anonymous tips via a throwaway email to the HOA and city. But Phil dropped a bombshell. His rental, it's a code disaster, has been for years, but the city lets it slide. Phil explained Darren had a buddy in code enforcement who buried or flagged complaints. Phil suggested we take our evidence to the city ombudsman, an impartial overseer who followed rules, not favors. Meanwhile, I learned Darren's side gig was a cash-only appliance repair business. He stashed old fridges and stoves in his yard, hidden under tarps. But lately, the SUV visits dwindled. New faces appeared. 2 young guys with tattoos unloaded crates at night. I sensed trouble brewing. Then one morning, I got a city letter, not a fine, but a notice of an investigation into Darren's property, sparked by an anonymous tip. That day, I saw Darren's truck speed off. I waited until night. Phil called. "The city's on him, Mike, and you weren't the only tipster." But before I could act, someone started leaving threatening notes on my truck. "Stay out of it. Tattlers get hurt." One was taped to my door in bold marker. My wife wanted to call the police, but she was scared. It was clear Darren, or his allies, knew I was pushing back. Things were about to turn nasty. After the threats, tensions skyrocketed. My wife was sleepless. I kept a crowbar by the bed and left the porch light blazing. I parked my truck blocks away to throw them off. Still, I refused to cower. Phil and the neighbors met at my place one Saturday. We laid out Darren's actions: fines, intimidation, litter, fake complaints. Phil gave us each a folder with every document, photo, email, and report. "No more hiding," he said. That Monday, we filed as a group, officially. We submitted to the city ombudsman, HOA board, city attorney, and every council member's office. We signed our names, no anonymity. We exposed Darren's reign of terror, his fake tips, his son's harassment, his unsafe rental. The ombudsman acted fast. He called a meeting with code enforcement. The HOA issued an urgent notice. Darren's secrets were now public. It was a week of uncertainty. The first blow landed swiftly. The city slapped a condemned notice on Darren's rental. They found shattered windows, leaks, mold, bad wiring, a slew of violations that should have closed it years ago. Darren's code enforcement pal. He was under scrutiny. The next day, the HOA suspended Darren. No more board power, just a regular member. Neighbors stopped acknowledging him. He tried waving but got blank stares. But Darren didn't quit. One night, his son, plastered, showed up at my house yelling. He stumbled across my lawn, ranting about snitches and how I wrecked their lives. I stood on my porch and called the cops. Half the street watched as Darren's son was arrested for drunkenness and trespassing. I filed for a restraining order the next day. Darren tried one final ploy. He sent a letter pleading to call it even, promising to drop complaints if I did. I ignored it. The city kept probing. They found Darren's yard packed with unlicensed appliances, chemical leaks, and tools. He faced fines over $5,000 and a citation for illegal dumping. He had to clean it up himself. The final strike was personal. His ex-wife, co-owner of the rental, filed her own grievances. She sued Darren for unpaid taxes and property damage. The city began proceedings to seize the property if he didn't pay up. Our neighborhood started healing. We talked more, watched out for each other. Mrs. Lopez installed cameras and we fixed fences and cleared trash together. The vibe lightened. People waved again. But I didn't escape unscathed. The rage, sleepless nights, and obsession drained me. My marriage suffered. My wife said she loved me but craved peace, not conflict. She felt I sank to Darren's level. I started counseling, apologized to her and my kids for letting Darren's venom infect us. But Darren, he sold his house to cover the fines. He vanished one night. No farewell, no remorse. I saw his battered truck, loaded, leaving the street for good. My calm returned gradually. The block felt normal. I never forgot the ordeal. I learned standing up has a price, but I ensured Darren felt the full weight of betrayal. Public, undeniable, inescapable. He reaped what he sowed. So did I.